It's autumn at the Escapist, and that means SCHLOCKTOBER returns. And no discussion of schlock filmmaking would be complete without talking about infamous B-movie mega-producer Charles Band and Full Moon, the direct-to-video powerhouse of the 80s and 90s that he tried to turn into the independent film version of Marvel Comics, complete with direct merchandising and movie-to-movie continuity. And it might even have worked if the internet fandom-generating machine had existed at the time, and also if the vast majority of movies they ended up putting out weren't, well, not very good. I could probably get several episodes out of the history of Full Moon, but SCHLOCKTOBER is about movies. So let's talk about my favorite Charles Band Full Moon movie franchise, which also happens to be the most successful and enduring thing pretty much everyone involved ever put out. Puppet Master, a movie series that has spawned something like 10 sequels to date, depending on how you count. The original Puppet Master from 1989 is a weird animal. It almost feels like they wanted to make a haunted house movie, but monsters would be cheaper than ghosts, small monsters would be cheaper than big monsters, and small monsters that were supposed to look like puppets would be cheaper than convincing ones. I don't know if that was the case, but that's kind of what it looks like. Anyway, the movie is set in a coastal hotel and opens in 1939 with a mysterious Geppetto-like marionette maker named Andre Toulon doing his thing, which happens to be making puppets that he can somehow bring to life. A pair of Nazi spies show up looking for him, apparently because Hitler wants to weaponize whatever magic Toulon is using, but the Puppet Master hides his creation in the walls and commits suicide, apparently taking his magic to the grave. 50 years later, a group of psychic investigators converge on the hotel to look into its supposedly haunted history, but really it's because one of them is evil and wants to find Toulon's secret to use it to become immortal. But the puppets are still there, and they get out and kill everybody. That's kind of it. Look, it's just not a very good movie, honestly. But audiences really liked the puppet characters, which, incidentally, for this inaugural run, included Jester, Leechwoman, Tunneler, Pinhead, and franchise mascot Blade. So they did a sequel. Puppet Master 2 was a big improvement, directed by and featuring special effects from stop-motion animation legend David Allen, who got his start on last year's SCHLOCKTOBER feature Equinox. Toulon, the Puppet Master, rises from the grave as a mummified, zombie, Phantom of the Opera-type guy, and puts the puppets to work killing people to get human brains he needs to make more of the magic formula, which we learn he apparently discovered in Egypt as a younger man. That'll be important later. Tunneler and Leechwoman both check out of this version, but we get a new guy named Torch in the process. It's a fun, sick little horror movie, and I still like the ambiguity of whether Toulon was always evil or has zombie-induced insanity, and it's fun that the puppets always seem to have a side agenda of their own. Puppet Master 3, released the same year, is often referred to as the high point of the series, and it's definitely the most ambitious. It's a prequel set in Nazi Germany, which not only means that Tunneler and Leechwoman get to be back to life, along with a new friend named Six Shooter, but also that the puppets now get to be full-on good guys. It turns out Andre Toulon was using his secretly sentient marionettes to stage satirical anti-Hitler productions, which the Nazis didn't appreciate, plus they want his formula to make immortal soldiers. Toulon's wife gets killed, so he and the puppets go out for revenge on the Third Reich. We also find out that Leechwoman is carrying the soul of Toulon's dead wife, which actually contradicts most of the plot of Part 2, but this is just not the series to worry about things like that in. Puppet Master 4 and Puppet Master 5, the final chapter, were shot back-to-back simultaneously, something Full Moon was doing a lot of during the 90s heyday of straight-to-video horror movies, and intended to be the conclusion of the series. We're back in the present once again with a group of young scientists who discover the puppets while studying artificial intelligence. But the series isn't done expanding its increasingly absurd mythology. It turns out Toulon's magic originally belonged to an Egyptian demon god named Sutek, who takes time out from what you'd have to assume is a busy schedule of tormenting those infernal Power Rangers to dispatch his tiny minions, the Totems, to take the magic back. And yeah, that's pretty much the fourth and fifth movie. The now good puppets versus evil puppets and more or less the devil. Works for me, and that was supposed to be the end of it. Unfortunately, Full Moon never quite found a franchise as popular or as marketable as this one, so 4 years later, in 1998, we got Curse of the Puppet Master, which undermines the mostly happy ending of Part 5 to place the puppets at the mercy of a new evil master who goes to murderous lengths to try and create a master race of puppets for himself. It doesn't end well for him, or really for anyone who actually has to watch this movie. The next year gave us Retro Puppet Master, another prequel with young Andre Toulon fighting the Nazis with unfinished beta versions of the puppets, a premise which sounds absolutely nothing like an excuse to create variants for Full Moon's briefly profitable and now highly collectible in-house toy line. And yes, that is indeed Greg Sestero, aka Mark from The Room, as the young Toulon.
Oh, hi, Mark.
3 years later, they put out Puppet Master Legacy, which is, I kid you not, basically just a clip show of all the previous movies that attempts to explain the series' continuity up to that point, which turns out to be fruitless because it just gets more confusing after that. See, the details as to why are a little fuzzy, but at some point Band and Full Moon actually lost control of their own licenses, which allowed the Sci-Fi Channel to produce Puppet Master vs. Demonic Toys. Demonic Toys being another Band-produced Killer Small Things series that had itself last been seen in another crossover, Doll Man vs. Demonic Toys. Yeah, Charles Band's seems to have a thing about tiny monsters. But whatever, this was bad even for Puppet Master, and Full Moon subsequently reclaimed the rights and branded this one not part of the official canon, which they themselves picked back up recently with Puppet Master Axis of Evil in 2010 and Puppet Master Axis Rising just last year. These are prequels again, this time set in the US in the early 1940s, and concerning a young man who befriends Toulon at the hotel from the first two movies shortly before his death and sets about borrowing and protecting the puppets we'd previously believed remained at the hotel that whole time. Instead, it turns out they were running around protecting America from Nazi agents and eventually evil Nazi puppets the whole time. Fine, whatever, works for me. But you know, it's funny. None of the Puppet Master movies individually are all that good. 2 through 5 are fun, sure, but there isn't a masterpiece in the bunch if we're being honest. And yet, taken as a whole, they kind of add up to something endearing, actually kind of impressive. It's an incredibly odd series to devote this much effort and myth-making to, but they've been doing these for 25 years. Eventually, admiring the kind of bizarre dedication that went into that starts to rub off on the movies themselves. So, yeah, go watch some Puppet Master movies. You might like them. Next week, Schlocktober continues. I'm Bob, and that's the big picture.